the Warriors, who right now are having an offensive outage. It marks the second consecutive game in which the Golden State Warriors were held to under 100 points, and there was just no answer for Anthony Edwards. And listen, when Edwards has it going, there are few teams that can stop what is just clearly a rising star in this league. And take your hat off to the Minnesota Timberwolves. As I talked about on the pregame show, this has been a team that has been feast or famine over the last now 8 games, where they lost 4 in a row, and it culminated in that loss to Sacramento, in which Anthony Edwards and the team just hit rock bottom, and he called him out, essentially. And he is truly one of the young leaders in this league as well. And he called them soft. He included himself in that. He said there was a lot of internal bickering that it had to stop. And since then, the Minnesota Timberwolves have now won 4 consecutive games, including tonight's win, once again, 107-90 over the Golden State Warriors. And all 4 of those wins for the T-Wolves, they have held their opponents, including the Warriors tonight, to 95 or less points. So that was their hallmark, their calling card of a year ago, where they were clearly head and shoulders above the rest of the league defensively, and it propelled them to a position in the Western Conference Finals, which they would eventually lose to the Dallas Mavericks, but they were knocking on the door of going to the NBA Finals, and it was the defense that really, once again, was the storyline for them. This year, it's been a completely different story. The defense has been bad. The offense hasn't been very good, and as I talked about, they lost 4 consecutive games, but now have turned things around, winners of 4 straight. For the Golden State Warriors, just when you thought Jonathan Kuminga would be that guy, it's right back to square one. And who is going to be number 2 as far as scoring the basketball? Jonathan Kuminga, if you were looking for any sort of consistency, it was not to be, as Kuminga tonight finished with just a very uneventful 13 points. He was a -7 on the game, as the Warriors, once again, after losing 5 in a row, they get that victory against Houston. And just when you think, with Jonathan Kuminga playing so well in the absence of Steph Curry and Draymond Green, that the Warriors maybe have had a wake-up call where their young player that has been the object of so much conjecture had turned the corner and now was ready to carry the load in that mantle of being the number 2 to Steph Curry. But he's not the same player when Draymond and Steph are on the floor. He becomes a reluctant shooter, and he lacks the confidence. And today, it was a very forgetful 13 points, and he was not good. As I mentioned, he was a -13 on the game tonight. He was a -7 for the Golden State Warriors. Same 2 teams to get after it once again on Sunday as the baseball series continues. The T-Wolves winning tonight. As I mentioned, that's 4 in a row for them. The Warriors, of course, their undoing was 22 turnovers, which was a season high for them. The 22 turnovers were pretty much balanced, as everybody had a part in it. And it just was one of the ugliest games that the Warriors not only have played this year, but in recent memory. Golden State not good offensively, turning it over, and the defense just simply was not good enough, especially in trying to stop Anthony Edwards. The Warriors tonight losing 107-90. So Golden State really now in a bit of a funk when you think about the offensive productivity or the lack thereof. And if you think back to the days with the Warriors and the Splash Brothers, and of course during that dynastic run, and even a couple of years ago with the championship over Boston, never would you think that a Warrior team with Steve Kerr and Steph Curry and Draymond Green would be deficient offensively, but that's the problem, is they cannot score the basketball. All right, let's open up the phone lines at 888-957-9570. That's 888-957-9570. Let's start things with Steel Toe. Wants to talk about the loss tonight. He's hanging out in San Mateo. Steel, what's on your mind, buddy?
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, like you said, in the past, Steve Kerr had the advantage over the league because and won those championships because they were the only one that shot threes and shocked the whole league. And right now, the whole league caught up, and they're shooting threes, and they can score in the paint. And Steve Kerr no longer has that advantage. And I feel like this team can never win with Steve Kerr now that he has no clue how to score in the paint while shooting threes. He's just a three-point shooter, and he won championships because nobody else won threes, shot threes. And that's the problem right there, I don't know why they were scared to go score at Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert has a reputation of fouling out when you attack him in the paint. And Steve Kerr don't know how to teach that. And until we get rid of Steve Kerr, this war organization is never going to win. Thank you, Dan.
All right, Steele, appreciate it. Yeah, a lot of frustration on the part of Warrior fans. And as far as Steve Kerr is concerned, and a team, let's face it, they introduced playing the three and at addressing the three-point line, and with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and just about everybody taking part in that up and down two-way basketball, that they took over the NBA by storm. And nobody played that way. They changed the game, literally. Steph Curry has altered the way the NBA, changed the landscape of NBA basketball. And Steele's spot on. Teams not only caught up to the Golden State Warriors, but they've clearly now surpassed them. Listen, Steele, I'll go down this road with you and agree with you and go this far. I don't know that I can necessarily hammer Steve Kerr as far as no longer being an effective coach, but the 22 turnovers, to me, when you turn the ball over, and it doesn't matter if it's in the NFL or in the NBA, I've always felt that that's a reflection on the coach. That when you have consistent turnovers on a basketball team, that at some point there's got to be some level of discipline, a culture, a different way of doing things. Now, to Steele's point, I think that the Warriors and Steve Kerr get a pass because of the way they introduced basketball. It was a chaotic style of playing the game where you would get up and down. And so turnovers were going to happen because nobody was pushing the tempo and nobody was playing with that sort of style other than that of the Golden State Warriors. So they would accept and tolerate the turnovers because they recognized that that was conducive to the way they would score the basketball. And it was just a reflection of them of pushing the ball and getting up and down the floor and just their style of play, which they would trade the turnovers for the number of threes and, of course, the lopsided wins and the impressive record when they were in that remarkable dynastic run. But now there is no margin of error for the Golden State Warriors. They no longer can play that style of basketball because they simply don't have the shooters and they don't have the athletes, and it's not that two-way team where you can get up and down the floor and play basketball and sort of be the pace car because you're the only one doing it. The Warriors, to Steel Toe's point, now have to play basketball a different way, and they have to win a different way because you're not going to be able to outscore teams. And so the turnovers now don't make sense. You don't get the pass of, well, that's just the way we play and we shoot threes better than anybody else. And the threes are just sort of a byproduct or a result of that sort of tempo. Now when you're a team that's doing it primarily on defense and with Steph Curry and the quote-unquote power in numbers, you can't turn the ball over. That's just a recipe for disaster, and it's a recipe to lose. And that's exactly what happened tonight as the Golden State Warriors with it really was just an embarrassing 22 turnovers. There's turnovers, and then there's the 22 turnovers that the Golden State Warriors had tonight. And listen, part of that's attributed to, as I mentioned, the defense and the T-Wolves. It's not coincidental that they, during this winning streak, since Anthony Edwards called out the team, that they have won 4 straight, but they've kept all of their opponents to under 95 points, and I believe that's the first time they've been able to do that since 2012. So they're a good defensive team. And let's not forget that a year ago, they were the best defensive team. And the expectations and the bar was so high for this team, not only with the defense, but offense, and with the additions of Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards coming into his own, that this was a team was expected to challenge OKC and be right up there at the top of the Western Conference. And they hadn't played like it until until now. And quite frankly, they're resembling that team that took the conference by storm a year ago. And so their defense is for real. They have the ability to play that sort of defense. But I also think that it was the perfect storm of just poor basketball and the preventable turnovers on the part of the Golden State Warriors. And it was lethargic basketball. It was the lazy passes. The Warriors are in love with the baseball pass or trying to hit the home run, especially when it comes to Draymond Green and Steph Curry. They are always looking for that leak out, and they're in love with trying to get that quick basket. And more often than not, it results in turnovers. But again, when it happens repeatedly, you begin to think, well, that's just the way we play basketball. And it's sort of accepted. It's given a pass on the part of Steve Kerr and the powers that be. And that doesn't make a lot of sense because it's not the style of basketball for the Golden State Warriors currently. They're trying to win a completely different way in 2024, doing it with defense, doing it with the 12 or 13 bodies that they're using. And really quick, as we think about the turnovers, everybody, and I'll roll up some of the numbers here because the wealth was distributed throughout when you talk about the Warriors' inability to take care of the basketball. Jonathan Kuminga, I talked about after a strong performance where he had the career high 33 points, just a very pedestrian 13 tonight. He turned it over 3 times. He had silly fouls, 3 fouls. The 2 turnovers by Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins, by the way, did not return in the second half. He played 2 quarters. He went into that game with a bad ankle and re-injured it, and he was scratched for the second half. Of course, we'll pass along an update if we have one made available, but he is now day-to-day for the Golden State Warriors, not returning. Moses Moody also did not return to the contest for the Golden State Warriors. 3 turnovers for Steph Curry. He was not crisp with the basketball. Brandon Podziemski had 2 turnovers as well. Draymond Green turned it over 2 times. Turnovers for Lindy Waters. Turnovers for Trace Jackson Davis, who threw it to somebody in the front row, which was just really indicative of the way the Golden State Warriors play basketball. And Pat Spencer, in a brief run, had 2 turnovers he had 2 turnovers in 7 minutes of play. But that was par for the course for the Golden State Warriors, who just were not very good tonight as the Warriors fall once again with a final count of 107-90. The 90 points, that is a season low for Golden State as the Warriors now fall to 13-9 on the season. And it's the offense right now. If you're looking for a culprit and you want to point a finger, it's the offense. And really it's been the offense all year long because we have talked about who's going to be the number 2 to Steph Curry. And just to reiterate off the top, where we thought it was going to be Jonathan Kuminga in a best-case scenario where you didn't have to go out and trade your youngsters and trade draft picks at the deadline. I certainly didn't have to do it during the offseason, that you were hoping that it could be somebody in-house and that guy would be Jonathan Kuminga, that this would be the year that he would blossom. But again, it's 1 step forward and 2 steps back. After the 33 points last night, Jonathan Kuminga does a disappearing act tonight. So no level of consistency with Jonathan Kuminga, and that's just really notable because I think as important as last night's game was and a breakout for one JK, tonight was equally as important because what it is that you wanted to see was Jonathan Kuminga to follow that up and demonstrate to everybody that he's ready to take over the mantle and that last night was not an outlier, but rather an indicator of things to come. But instead, nowhere to be found. 13 points, and once again, had his share of turnovers as the Golden State Warriors with a season-high 22 turnovers tonight. Part of the reason why they get beat by Anthony Edwards, who led everybody with 30 points. All right, we're going to continue with Warriors Live. We'll have much more, including we'll hear from the head coach, Steve Kerr, as we continue on 95.7 The Game right after this. repair, no brainer here. 30 points for one. Anthony Edwards, a plus 23. They talk about a quiet 30, I guess, for the Ant-Man. He was just too much. And the Golden State Warriors had no answer for a guy that's what leaders do. And he called out his team, and they have responded now once again with their fourth consecutive win and the fourth straight time that the T-Wolves, the best team defensively in the NBA a year ago, hold an opponent to under 95 points. All right, let's just recap the first quarter. The scoring opened up with Jonathan Kuminga hitting a three, and you're thinking, all right, that confidence is carried over to the next day in a back-to-back. Of course, they beat Houston last night, and they did it behind Kuminga's 33 points, including those huge buckets down the stretch. Draymond Green, by the way, coming off the bench tonight. Wiggins and J.K. both getting the start. As I mentioned, Wiggins did not return with that bad ankle in the second half. Both teams in that first quarter playing a good brand of basketball. It was entertaining, and I singled that out because it was such an ugly affair in a rock fight last night against the Houston Rockets, and aesthetically much better basketball, at least after one quarter between the two teams. Second quarter action, this is when you began to see Kuminga just beginning to look a little bit reluctant again to shoot the basketball. And this wasn't the case against Houston. And keep in mind, against the Rockets, he went through stretches where he didn't play well, but knowing that he wasn't coming out of the game, there was a sense of confidence in his game last night as opposed to tonight. And I think that there's a sense of feeling as though he has to defer when Steph Curry's on the floor, as well as Draymond Green. He does not play with the same sort of attitude and becomes very, very sheepish about shooting the basketball, especially after missing a few shots. And I don't think that man should play with any level of conscience. He has to have a high volume in terms of shooting and shooting a lot, because they need someone. They need volume shooters. They need someone to score the basketball. And it should not matter to him if he misses 3 or 4 shots in a row. At one point in that second quarter, the Golden State Warriors had a lineup of Podziemski, Looney, Buddy Hield, Draymond Green, and Wiggins. And when we talk about no offense, I think that highlighted exactly what it is that I'm talking about. They went through a 6-minute stretch where Podziemski, Looney, Buddy Hield, Draymond, and Wiggins did not score the basketball more than 6 minutes. The T-Wolves would build a lead at 41-33. The Warriors, as I talked about, just really struggled offensively. The T-Wolves went on a 23-2 run. However, Golden State, thanks in large part to Draymond Green, he provided a spark, and they would end the half on an 11-2 run, and they would slice into that lead and be down just 10. After trailing by as many as 19, they'd be down 56-46 at the break. At the break, Edwards had 12 points to lead the Wolves. Jaden McDaniels had 10. Wiggins had 11 points. Draymond had 10 at the break. Wiggins, as I mentioned, and Moses Moody not returning. In that third quarter, Curry would open with a 3. Kuminga would get a bucket, and the Warriors suddenly had that 10-point lead down to 5 at 56-51. Lindy Waters would get a 3 in transition after that, and the Warriors looked as though they were ready to close the margin, but it would be as close as they would get the entire evening. They got to within 3 at 60-57, and then Anthony Edwards he took over. He would hit some threes, get a mid-range, bump the lead back up to 10 again. Just a side note, Trayce Jackson-Davis, who also, as I mentioned, not playing well today and turning the basketball over. But Trayce Jackson-Davis has lost his confidence as well. Clearly, when you think about the start of the season, 2 guys that were such major contributors, Trayce Jackson-Davis, as well as Buddy Hield. And Trayce Jackson-Davis is a mere shell of himself. And this happens to second-year players where he's in his own head as well. A lot like that of Brandon Podziemski. And Buddy Hield, who is in a shooting funk. I talked about this in the pregame show that, Buddy Hield is much like a lot of shooters in the NBA. And when he's hot, you ride him, you feed him. And when he's cold, this is what it is that you deal with. And this has always been Buddy Hield. When he was with Sacramento, certainly was when the 76ers a year ago. There is the Buddy Hield, he's a tale of two cities, and sometimes very good. Other times he can be what it is that we've experienced over the last couple of games. But Buddy Hield is clearly a guy that I think he needs help to get his shot off. He needs either coming off the pin down or screens. He's not somebody very good in terms of getting a step back or using his handle to create space to get his shot off. And it has been a complete disaster for him. And also, when you think about the hot start for the Golden State Warriors, Trayce Jackson-Davis was part of that. He provided such solid basketball play, especially around the rim, the pick and roll, and working so well with Draymond and Steph. And now, not only has he lost his confidence, but much like that of Brandon Podziemski in his sophomore year, he's having a hard time scoring. And I'm talking about scoring bunnies in around the basket, as Trayce Jackson-Davis, very, very ineffective tonight. And he also was part of the turnover mess. 22 on the game for the Warriors, and he had 2 as well. Curry did hit a 3 at the buzzer to cut it to 78-72 at the end of the third quarter. Curry did have a 3 to open up the fourth, but once again, the Warriors would not get any closer than 3 points, as Edwards would answer with a 4-point play, and they did not look back. They went up 87-77. It was too much Anthony Edwards, as Edwards would finish with 30 points in the contest, as the Golden State Warriors would lose it with a final score of 107-90. Really quick, one more footnote on Brandon Podziemski, and I mentioned this the last time I was doing a Warriors postgame show in that loss against Denver, that I don't know if the ends are justifying the means when it comes to Brandon Podziemski, because he is such a headsy player, and we all know this. The reason why he gets starts and the reason why he plays nearly 40 minutes against Houston and getting a serious burn tonight is Podziemski's. Take a look at Podziemski's numbers tonight. He played in 25 minutes tonight. But Brandon Podziemski makes all the right plays. Podziemski, we always talk about making the good basketball plays, taking the charges. He had the 11 rebounds last night. But the inability to score the basketball is really becoming problematic. And he doesn't have to be the number 2. When I talk about, the Warriors clearly need somebody other than Steph Curry. And you thought it would be Jonathan Kuminga, but Kuminga taking a big step backwards tonight after the 33 last night. But he does have to keep defenses honest to some degree. And he cannot. I talk about Trayce Jackson-Davis, it creeping in between his ears. Brandon Podziemski has lost all confidence in his stroke. He hit a couple of threes tonight, but again, not reaching double digits. And Podziemski, just a lack of confidence with him as well. And his offense is clearly left him. And as I talked about, does the end justify the means? As good as he has been in terms of his headsy basketball play, does it justify giving this guy as much time when you can't score? The problem with the Warriors right now, it's spacing. Because you can't have a team where Trayce Jackson-Davis is never going to give you points. That's not what it is that he does. He's a pick and roll, rebound, protect the rim sort of guy. Kevon Looney obviously is not somebody you're running an offense through. Draymond Green, yes, he's been better offensively this year, but not somebody that you think of as an offensive threat. And GP2 is a guy he's a defender. He's a guy that'll play in that dunker spot, but clearly not an offensive threat and never has been. That's too many guys on one team where defenses don't have to worry about you. And if you throw Podziemski into that mix, that's just not a winning formula. Having that many players on a basketball team in the NBA that are no threat to give you any consistent basketball points, to give you any points, whether it be in the paint or out on the perimeter. And Brandon Podziemski now has thrown his name into that hat, and it becomes a real problem for the Golden State Warriors going forward. Warriors now 13-8, once again losing tonight to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Same 2 teams will play on Sunday in the baseball series. Let's hear from the head coach tonight after the Warriors loss. Here's Steve Kerr.
Yeah, we couldn't get organized. We played a pretty good first quarter offensively, scored 31 points. We just were out of position over and over again, which led to us having to go one-on-one against a great defensive team, best in the league a year ago, and obviously they've held the Lakers and Clippers to 80 the past 2 games, so they're finding their way defensively. So we have to execute better. It's simple as that. 22 turnovers, not going to cut it. And if we went through, and looked at them, which I will obviously tonight, I don't think that many of them were forced. I think that most of them were poor spacing, which led to difficult one-on-one situations for our guys. So the spacing's got to get better. I'm sorry?
Why don't you think you were organized?
We're trying. We're mixing and matching. Obviously, I started differently. The reason for starting differently was to try to help the second unit get organized with Draymond. But we need some more practice time. We've got to get our act together. We were much better offensively the first couple of weeks of the season, and last couple of weeks we've been struggling, which is why I've been searching lineup wise. Tonight the game got away from us a little bit. Moses got hurt early. Wiggs gets hurt I think early second half, so that changed all the rotation patterns. But doesn't matter. We've got to have guys who are coming in and ready to execute and get to their spots, and we go through our stuff, and we're going to have to go over it more, obviously.
Steve, is there a point when you felt the game getting away, or was that earlier, or did it come later?
Well, both. You fell down 19 in the second quarter, and then had a good finish to the second, and then a great run in the third to cut it to 3. So felt like we were right where we needed to be, but then it got away from us again, early in that fourth quarter.
And what is it about their defense that makes it so difficult for offenses to run their stuff?
Well, they got a lot of long athletes. McDaniels does a good job on the ball. Obviously, Gobert, at the rim, they got a good puzzle. The puzzle fits for them really well. They've got wing defenders, on-ball defenders with Conley and McDaniels and Gobert at the rim. So it's a well-constructed, well-coached team.
Is Draymond, the alignment starting with Draymond coming off the bench to organize the second unit, is that something you want to look at going forward? Is this just a one-night trial?
I want to look at it. I mean, we're trying to maximize Jonathan. Playing him with Wiggs, playing Loon to start with that group. Means that Draymond doesn't have to guard the opposing center right from the get-go, which I think is important. Then we can, close with Draymond at the 5. So in theory, I like what it looks like, but we have to play better and we have to make better decisions.
That is head coach Steve Kerr tonight after the Warriors fall to 13-9 on the season, as the Warriors now losers of 6 of their last 7. Of course, they snapped that 5-game losing streak after taking care of the Houston Rockets. I think it was notable that Steve Kerr talked about how Draymond Green will continue to come off the bench, that he wants to, quote-unquote, maximize Jonathan Kuminga. And Draymond, although coming off the bench, he'd like to close with Draymond, which makes sense. And I think, again, this is Jonathan Kuminga, and we've talked about this young player, and he really is sort of the X factor when you think about it. We've talked about him to death, and last night was so notable, and it was one of those games that really was worth putting an asterisk next to, because Steph wasn't there, Draymond wasn't there, but it was the kid who not only scored a career-high 33, but it was in the closing moments where he sealed the deal. And so what you were looking for tonight was for more Jonathan Kuminga to be a consistent scorer of the basketball and somebody that could be that quote-unquote second option for the Warriors to that of Steph Curry. But it would not be, as he had just 13 points, 2 turnovers in the game. He was not very good. And he also had 3 personal fouls. And Jonathan Kuminga looks like a reluctant player when Steph Curry returns and Draymond Green. And his confidence wanes, as opposed to the other night, again, where he would miss shots and he'd make Jonathan Kuminga type mistakes, but knowing that he wasn't going to get pulled and knowing that he wasn't going to draw the ire of one Draymond Green or didn't have to defer to Steph Curry, he would continue to shoot. And I think that's the mentality that he has to adopt. And it's crucial for him to be that guy, because if he's not, it's significant in this regard. And what I read into when Coach Kerr says that he's going to maximize Jonathan Kuminga and continue to go with this lineup of Draymond Green coming off the bench. And listen, Steve Kerr continues to sort of hunt and peck and search for the winning formula. So Draymond coming off the bench, I mean, that could end in a game or two. But as of right now, the maximizing Jonathan Kuminga is for a couple of reasons. First of all, obviously, you're looking for Kuminga again to be the guy that he was against the Houston Rockets. Maybe not scoring 33, but somebody who's confident with the basketball in his hands, especially in the closing moments of a game. So if they're blitzing Steph Curry, Jonathan Kuminga can ISO, pick and roll, and get you buckets or get to the line. That's first and foremost. But secondly, this guy is looking at a potential extension. And as an unrestricted free agent, or as a restricted free agent, I should say, the Warriors want to know, because you can only play this game for so long. The Jonathan Kuminga, are you going to be that guy or not? Jonathan Kuminga, the tease, where he shows flashes like he did last night, but then again, not being able to follow that up with a solid performance this evening. The Warriors are going to have to make a decision on whether or not they're going to offer this guy what is market value at about $30 to $35 million a year and give him that sort of Jordan Poole type of an extension or a Wiggins type extension. And so I think maximizing Jonathan Kuminga is going to answer a lot of those questions, because he continues to be the one guy on the Golden State Warriors that really could solve a lot of things, but at the same time, he could be that trade piece. And I think the Warriors want to they want to accelerate so that they can get to that point where they can make the decision as to, okay, we're all on the same page. It's time to move off on this guy. And it could, listen, it could haunt them, anybody at age 22. But these are the hard decisions you have to make as NBA executives, whether it's Dunleavy collaborating with that of Steve Kerr, when you're talking about paying a guy like that of Jonathan Kuminga. And I think that if he showed any sort of indicator that he could be that guy and sustain that high level of scoring like he did and take the pressure off of Steph Curry like he did the other night against the Houston Rockets, it would make their decision a lot more easier. But the Golden State Warriors falling once again, now losers of 6 of their last 7, and it's the offense that continues to be problematic for Golden State. As a season low 90 points, they were held to under 100 last night, despite the victory. They got 99 against the Houston Rockets, which was really, if you think about it, aside from what was a pretty finish on the part of Jonathan Kuminga, just an ugly contest between the two teams. And again, why that's notable, it's because Steph and Draymond are going to miss more games. Steph is soon to be 37 years of age, and Draymond's going to be 36. And these are two players that are not going to play a lot of back-to-backs. These are guys that are going to get load management. There's going to be nicks and bruises. So they're not going to play. They won't play 70 games this year. And if that's the case, if you're going to have to rest both of those guys, either at the same time or Steph taking time or Draymond taking time, that just means, again, it puts more pressure on other players, namely the Jonathan Kumingas, to be that leader when those guys aren't there and score the doggone basketball. Not to mention, it's not Steph and Draymond, but now if you're looking at an extended period here where you're without Andrew Wiggins, who along with Jonathan Kuminga is the other guy that gave you the double digits and has been this sort of reclamation project in 2024 and scoring the basketball. He in the pecking order, I think it's Steph Curry, it's Jonathan Kuminga, it's Andrew Wiggins. And if Wiggins is not available now because of the bad ankle, And if Moses Moody, who is another scoring option and another guy who could play at that number 2 spot, if those guys are not available to go along already with the absence of DeAnthony Melton, the Golden State Warriors now put that much more pressure on themselves as far as finding guys that can consistently score the ball. Because Golden State right now, offensively, it has been absolutely anemic in losing tonight 107-90 to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Again, listen, part of this, let's not forget that Minnesota was the best defensive team in all of the NBA of a year ago. They had huge expectations coming into the season, and they have sort of returned to that form over the last 8 games where they lost 4 in a row. And even in that losing streak, their defense was much better. And then, of course, they won their last 4 straight in which they've held their opponents to under 95 points, and they have not done that since 2012. And, of course, it is Anthony Edwards that has led the way for this basketball team as they look like a completely different team. And Edwards was the vocal leader in calling out his squad, and it certainly has had results. Meanwhile, the Golden State Warriors now, they'll take on the T-Wolves again, but where do you go from here? With no Wiggins and no Moody for potentially the near future, you're already without DeAnthony Melton, and still the Jonathan Kuminga saga as to whether or not he can be a consistent scorer continues to plague this basketball team. Well, the Warriors will get a day off, and then once again, it's the Minnesota Timberwolves. Always interesting when you got to play that baseball series and the same team the next night. It's always difficult, although the Warriors did it earlier this year when they were able to defeat the New Orleans Pelicans in that baseball series, and when they played them on successive occasions on 2 home dates. And the same, once again, they'll do that again with the Minnesota Timberwolves, but the Minnesota Timberwolves always tough if they're going to repeat and take care of the Golden State Warriors. But we'll see the personality of that game. Is it going to be another big performance on the part of Anthony Edwards? And where the Warriors at in terms of reducing their turnovers? Once again, a season high, 22 tonight. And quite frankly, there's been a lot of games where they've turned the ball over throughout the years, but tonight was embarrassing. And it's sort of a reflection, I think, on Steve Kerr and a style of play that abruptly has to do an about face. All right, that'll do it for me. A reminder, don't forget to join myself and Evan Giddings. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. for Warriors This Week. For right now, it's Dan Avone for Warriors Live. Warriors lose it. Final score of 107-90, and the Warriors and the T-Wolves will play once again coming up right here on 95.7 The Game on Sunday. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning for Warriors This Week. Until then, this is Dan Avone saying good evening, everybody.